Okay folks, in this quick video we'll be taking a look at rendering Cinema 4D particles and splines with Arnold. We have this simple particle emitter in the scene, and as you can see it simply emits particles. And if I play my timeline and render the scene, you can see we get nothing in the render. We need to add an Arnold parameters tag to our emitter, so let's add one. And now we get these particles being rendered as spheres in our scene. Right now the spheres are too huge, so let's select the tag and decrease the radius multiplier to 0.3. The first option is render as. At the moment it is set to spheres, so we get our particles as spheres in the render. Just to see these particles a bit better, let's apply this blue standard surface shader to the emitter object. And there we go. Let's get back to the tag. Now we can render our particles as points, which render the particles in these kind of disc shapes. We have quads, we have custom, and in this mode we can use our own geometry as particle shapes. Let me create a torus, reduce the ring radius to 50 and pipe radius to 12. Also let's add a tube and change the inner radius to 40 and outer radius to 50. Select the tag again and let's drag this torus and tube to the custom shapes list, and as you can see we are using this torus and tube object as our particle shapes. And now using the shape mode we can tell Arnold how to distribute the defined shapes on the particles. We have 4 modes: sequential, random, blend, and first, which are self-explanatory. We also have child object. Let's use child object mode, and let me just hide the torus and the tube. Let's enable the sphere object and set it as the child of the emitter. Select the emitter and make sure show object is turned on. Also, this sphere has a dynamic tag applied to, so if I run my timeline, we would get this dynamic motion. Because we set the render points as child objects, we get the children objects of the emitter as the particle shapes. Right now it is just a sphere, but we can add any other objects that we want. Radius multiplier applies a global multiplier to the size of the particles. Let's set the radius to 1. We have minimum pixel width, so if you specify a number like 20, particles in points mode should at least occupy 20 pixels of the screen size. So in this case, if my particle is smaller than 20 pixels, it would be enlarged to be at least 20 pixels. Now the main usage for this parameter is when you have small particles much smaller than a pixel. Now anti-aliasing those would be really hard for the engine. And in that case, you can specify a number like 0.7, 0.8 or 1 to make sure it would be easier to anti-alias the image. Let me hide these particles for now. Also, we have an Arnold mesh particles tag that can be very useful, and it basically creates particles on the vertices of the desired mesh. I have this abstract 3D object in the scene. I'm going to unhide it and hide the emitter. If you right click on it and go to C4D28 tags, there is this Arnold Mesh Particles tag. I'm going to click on it, and if you select the tag and reduce the multiplier to something like 0.04, you can see on each vertex we get a particle, and the rest of the options are the same as before. Arnold also supports thinking particles and X particles, which is a third-party plugin. In the case of thinking particles, you need to create an Arnold TP group object from the Arnold menu and define the thinking particle group that you want to render. For now, let's hide the abstract object and unhide the emitter, and make sure the emitter has no child, and hide the dynamic sphere as well. In the Arnold parameters tag, make sure the particles are rendered as spheres, and set the radius multiplier to 0.1 for now. Now I'm going to select the emitter and add a tracer from the demograph menu. And select the tracer and change its limit to from end and limit amount to 25 frames. Now let's run through the timeline and stop it at around frame 150. Okay, now how can we render these tracer splines directly with Arnold? Simply add an Arnold parameters tag to the tracer. And let's set the curve width to 10 centimeters so we can see them better. And let's assign this pinkish standard surface shader to the tracer as well. Now if I select the parameter tag again, we can use this curve width to control the thickness of the spline. And we can use this scale curve to adjust the width along the spline. If you come down, you get these three spline modes: ribbon, thick, and oriented toward the camera view. Let's use the thick mode for now. Also, you can customize the width of the spline with textures. Let's for now change the curve width to 40 centimeters and add a noise shader to the texture field. Now let's change the global scale of the noise to 10%. Now, as you can see, this shader affects the spline width. So that is about rendering splines and particles in Arnold for Cinema 4D. See you in the next video.